I'm here with a bold prediction today, and that is that EV manufacturers, at least some of them, are going to find themselves at the pointy end of class action lawsuits regarding range. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John, and this actually came to a head for me this morning because there's been a couple of videos that have been put out that show how bad the range of EVs can be in even modest highway driving or relatively modest cold. Now, EVs do have a little bit of a reputation for being extremely efficient around the city, and I've at least seen pretty close to what their range should be. But once you get on the highway, they can either be pretty good or utterly horrible. And these two videos kind of drove it home for me and got me thinking. See, the first one is from TFL EV. I invite you to go check it out. It's really good, but they've got a Model 3. They charged the battery up. They parked it outside in the cold, and we're talking about like -0 Fahrenheit cold. And the next morning, they saw how much battery it had lost overnight. It was 3%. And then they put it on a highway loop. At the end of it, they had about 150-ish miles that they had driven. So with a car that has nearly 300 miles of, quote, range, they only got about 150. Alternately, Dennis CW, a YouTuber, has a Tesla Cybertruck, and he took it on an epic over 1,300-mile, 26-hour drive, and he had to stop 12 times to charge the thing up. In fact, I think that he actually said, or I read somewhere, that it made a 20-hour trip into a 27-hour trip. But the basic math, if you drive 1,340 miles and you stop 12 times, you're only getting about 110 miles. And he wasn't carrying a load. He was just driving. Now, they always have excuses. It's cold, it's hot. He didn't have a cover on the bed to reduce drag and things like that. But you can't escape that these real-world ranges are nowhere close to what they're actually saying on the sticker. And if you think back in history a little bit, manufacturers have been sued successfully for misrepresenting miles per gallon on some of their vehicles. So let's break this apart a little bit, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So when you look at the sticker for an EV, I've pulled up this one for an area right here. It does give you the MPGe, which I think is pretty worthless. I've done a whole video about that. I actually like the idea of a kilowatt hour per mile usage, that kind of thing. Some other kind of equivalent to miles per gallon that is actually what's the battery capacity. But they also determine and say straight on the sticker, in this case in two different places, what the range is. So if you're used to buying an internal combustion engine car and you see a city and a highway and a combined, you can expect when you get on the highway to get at least pretty close with modest driving to your highway mileage. It'll of course vary a little bit depending on conditions, rain, you're driving through slush, which increases the resistance, or if you're running the HVAC, the air conditioner, and things like that. But at least you think you're getting kind of close to it. Imagine the outroar if Toyota came out with a brand new Sequoia, but every time you drove on the highway, you got 1/3 the miles per gallon it said actually on the sticker. So the EPA actually tests EVs for their efficiency, and they do it very similar to how they do ICE cars, which is to run it on a city, run it on a highway loop, run it through various ones, kind of average everything together. But because they do this on a dynamometer and they don't have air resistance and everything else, they can adjust it a few different ways, manufacturer's choice, I believe. But basically, they take what they come up with in terms of range and multiply it by 0.7. So the example they give on their website is if they came up with 200 miles range, boom, they multiply it by 0.7, and they say the range is 140. So they're using the same processes, it looks like, for EVs, but it's not working in the real world, in real usage, and certainly at highway speeds. We're not talking about racing the truck, right? We're not talking about driving the Baja 1000. We're talking about driving 70 or 80 miles an hour and getting 1/2 to 1/3 what the expected range would be. So if you roll back in history, you can see examples. Ford was actually sued for the C-Max hybrid of misrepresenting the fuel economy. And it's about a 10 to 15% difference between the sticker and what people were actually getting. I believe they lost. Honda was sued, memorably, by owners of the hybrid Civic who got less, somewhere between 10 and 15% difference, as I recall. And one lady rejected the class action settlement, actually took it to court and won nearly $10,000 because Honda not only misrepresented it, she said, on the sticker, but when they went to update it, they actually made it even worse. And there's other examples I can vaguely remember in the past too where this has happened that I think it's a little unfair, if I'm being honest. The EPA says you have to test it. They give you the standards for the testing, and then you have to put those numbers on the sticker, but if it turns out to not be applicable in the real world, you can get sued for it. And here we have a situation where in those cases where you had hybrid type vehicles and they were getting somewhere between 10 and 15% less fuel efficiency, over here you have EVs that are getting 20, 30, 50% less than what is on the sticker. I mean, the answer to me is obvious. There's going to be a lawsuit. And I think certainly as more EVs come on the market and more there's more out there being used, you're going to have people who are not the early adopters and looking to maybe accept some of the flaws and some of the foibles, but people who are more inclined to come together and actually sue a manufacturer for misrepresentation. Again, I'm not saying it's entirely fair, but I've never seen anything coming more clearly than this. So what's the answer here? Well, I think that manufacturers are kind of backed into a corner. Again, the EPA sets the standards, they set the testing method, and then manufacturers do it, and the EPA spot checks them, and that's what they have to put on the sticker. That means the test is flawed, and even though they run it in their laboratory, and they multiply by 0.7 to make it more realistic to being hot weather or cold weather or running the air conditioner during the summer, it's not enough. And why do we only have one number? I think the entire system needs to be overhauled, at least for battery electric vehicles. We need a, kilowatt hour per mile city on the highway combined, and a range maybe in city and highway, something like that. But having just one number is a disservice to us, the buyers. It doesn't tell us how it really performs in the real world on the highway at 80 miles an hour. And it's a disservice to the manufacturers, I believe, truly setting them up to fail and to leave themselves open to overzealous attorneys who are litigious. Let me know what you think below, guys. I appreciate you being here.